Chapter 9. She was relieved to go back to bed for a while, to sleep off the rest of her hangover. When she woke up, Bill was already back from some errands and preparations. He seemed invigorated by the prospect of the upcoming challenges. "I gotta say, life with you ain't boring," Bill said as he was unpacking some tools and stuff he had just picked up. "I got you some things I figured might be useful. A big part of being a winner is to look the part." She opened one bag that was full of clothes, shiny, flashy clothes she would never have chosen for herself. Amongst them she found and pulled out a crown. She looked at Bill, who burst out laughing. "I couldn't resist, and I figured maybe you might want to lean into the royalty thing." She put the crown down again in a way that made it clear that he figured wrong. Bill told her about his past experience with these kinds of games. It had been a long time ago, but he spoke of his past with great enthusiasm, clearly excited to find himself back in this situation. "Remember that this is not just about winning, it's about winning big. How much betting goes on is how we rate your win." He explained how the games were controlled by the master of the games. No one knew who was behind the mysterious organization, but it had been the trusted authority of this cornerstone of lunar society for longer than the oldest lunaticians could remember. The master had a knack for choosing the challenges and combatants in a way that seemed fair and, more importantly, entertaining. Although the losers were always tempted to dispute the results, whatever verdicts the master put on was what stood. Games received relative amounts of attention depending on how much was on the line. A dispute like the one they were now a part of was quick to escalate into a lunar-wide festival. All manner of satellite events popped up alongside the competition itself. The outcome would redraw the map and determine if the new upstart gang would survive and become a big player in the lunar world, or get eaten up by the older, well-established gang who would become the biggest gang on the moon if victorious. She did not care about that. All she cared about was winning so that she could continue her mission to save her friends. The games began with a small ceremony. The gang leaders of the two rivaling factions bowed to each other and signed some contracts that they would follow the rules and adhere to the results whichever gang won. And then everything went crazy. She was led from one challenge to the next, having to show off her fitness and flexibility on one challenge, and then next, having to problem solve using her wits. She found herself having to dance off against a slightly older woman. She gave everything her absolute best, using everything remotely related from her past to try and outperform her opponent. After the end of the day, she was not feeling confident. She thought she did okay in most of the challenges. However, her competitors were very good, so she had lost more than she had won. Don't worry about it," Bill told her, having done much better himself, winning all but one of his challenges. He did have a black eye and a swollen lip from one of the more violent challenges. "Get some rest and focus on tomorrow." The next day went about the same, except she had done really well at some of the challenges, winning clear and decisive victories and garnering much applause from the audience. It did not feel enough still. She had lost more than she had won. Bill had lost 2 of his challenges and won the rest. When they met back at the room, they barely talked before collapsing from exhaustion. The third and final day was upon them. They had breakfast together and she admitted to feeling unsure of herself. She worried that she had lost too many of her challenges and that might lose them the games. Bill shook his head and grabbed his hat from the table. "It's not over till it's over," he said. "The last day's challenges count the most. Keeps it all suspenseful." The way he seemed calmed about it helped her find her feet again. She would put everything she had into whatever challenges she would face today. As it turned out, there was only one challenge. It was a race. Every contestant had to find their way from the starting point to a finishing line that was on the other side of an abandoned part of a large section of tunnels and habitats. The sector had been an industrial area long ago, where they had processed resources that were no longer in demand in the world of declining space travel and exploration. The contestants each had their own starting time and location. Once the race was on, it was every champion for himself. Collaboration was not strictly prohibited, but it was discouraged and points could be impacted. There were cameras and sensors all over the section. However, there were many blind spots and dangers along the way. When this was being explained to them, she noticed the men she had humiliated in the bar that night, when this had all started, giving her discerning looks. They clearly bore her a grudge, and they had some malicious intent towards her. This was not good. She had no advantage here, really. No knowledge of the lunar design with light, aluminum panels covering everything, which was very different from the dugout Earth tunnels back on Earth. This was not good. She had to win. She had to, for her friends. The moment she got her green light, she launched herself away from the starting point. The hallways were long and had numerous turns that made it really easy to get turned around and lost. There were many closed doors which she had no way to open, so more than once she came upon a dead end and was forced to turn around. She had an idea of what she needed to do. She wanted to find a place with a blank spot, where no one could see or hear her. Some moon running later, she found a place she thought would do. She took out the tablet. She knew that Elise had precious little chi energy left, and yet it was enough for a quick conference, she hoped. "Elise," she whispered. When nothing happened, she tried to gently squeeze the tablet and give it a little shake and said a little bit louder, "Elise, I really need your help. If we don't win this race, we will never make it to oldest. I don't know what else to do. Can you help me like you did before and show me where to go?" She waited a moment, and then the moment passed. Elise was not going to respond this time, she thought. She was about to put the tablet away when it gave the slightest vibration. She felt the shudder go down her spine as relief flowed over her. The tablet showed her and a network of lines surrounding her. A green line indicated where to go, but it only went so far before forking off into two directions, with each line forking in turn leading to multiple paths to choose from. "Shit," she thought, and set off in the direction of the line, hoping to figure it out as she came to it. She was nervous about having the tablet out and running around staring at it, in case a camera caught her, leading everyone to wondering what it was that she had. So she tried to remember the map and its many twists and turns, making a few mistakes but mostly managing well. She had passed the first fork and chosen one of the directions based on nothing more than a gut feeling. Not far after that, she turned a corner and stopped dead. Up ahead, further down the walkway, was a kind of room opening. On the other side of that tunnel continued on, and there stood one of the men she had spoken to down in the bar. He had the advantage of having known these tunnels, and he and his friends had each placed themselves so that they could catch her. As she slowly started to back up, the man began to move quickly towards her. She turned around and moved as quickly as she could away. She thought she remembered the path back to the fork, figuring she would go the other way and try to escape her pursuer that way. She had found the right way and was moving towards the new path when suddenly she saw ahead another one of the men. He had been waiting for her like the other one. Clearly they had known where she would come. They had to be cheating somehow. She was trapped. The two men cornering her from either side, clearly meaning to do her some serious harm. It was not uncommon for people to get injured in these tunnels, even disappear completely. She thought desperately about charging one of the men. He was much stronger than her and likely an experienced fighter. But what else to do? She grabbed a metal pipe that lay on the floor and looked towards the man down the hall. He just smiled at her, clearly not feeling any threat from her arming herself. She lifted the pipe and readied herself. What else could she do but charge? Then the man just vanished. She had blinked, and he was gone. Confused, she kept moving forward. When she came to where the man had stood, she was just in time to see a trap door shut and closed. It had swallowed the man up. She jumped over the spot and hurried onward, fearing that the other man would catch up with her. It was only after many turns and a good distance that she dared feel as if she might have evaded capture and brought out the tablet again. The map showed her and the green line that led away from where she was now, with only one line leaning towards what looked like a circular open area. Some time later, she found her way there. It was a circular dome that had a top window that let in some sunlight. She walked in, looking around at the closed cabin doors. It looked like a kind of locker room, she thought, where some moon workers from the past might have changed to get ready for whatever it was that they had done here. She was sure there would be cameras here, so she dared not take out the tablet without getting somewhere safe first. Before she could figure out her next move, the door she had come through slammed shut with a loud bang that startled her so much that she nearly wet herself. Had the men found her? She looked around and saw only closed doors. Panic began to slide in, and then she heard a slight hiss. Dust that had been floating in the air began to glide upwards and twirl around towards the window above. Air was escaping the room. Someone was going to kill her. "Please, I did not mean to cause any trouble," she pleaded. "I just wanted to get away off the moon and find Oldest." "How do you know he wants to be found?" came a cold, measured voice from everywhere around the room. She looked around and answered honestly, "I don't, but I need to try to save my friends, my city." She answered, still pleading with whomever was behind this death trap she had walked into. During the second of silence before the voice spoke again, she thought to herself that it had been her tablet that had led her here. All else excluded, that just made no sense. Why would it put her in danger? "Answer me this then," the voice said, like a blade hanging over her head. "If you came upon a flock of people trapped in a field, what would you do? Would you open up the gates, letting them roam the mountains at their peril? And that thing you carry, that is a powerful tool. Once Oldest has charged it up for you, How will you wield it? Will you use it to gain power over your mother? Get revenge for what she did to you? Become the new leader of your city? She stood gravely still, fearing that the floor might drop out from under her any moment, the air still hissing out of the window above like sand running through an hourglass, counting her remaining moments. She could not think, so she spoke her honest truth. "I don't know," she said in a low voice. She heard herself. It was the same voice she would use to humble herself after her mother had scolded her. This triggered something in her, and she tried again. Clearing her throat, she spoke clearer and louder now. "I would ask the people if they wanted me to set them free, and why they were in there. Then I would help them if they asked me to help. And I do not see Elise as a tool. She was once a person. I do not quite understand all of it yet. Yet if I make it oldest and he is able to help her, it or she is free to do what she wants." She finished and then listened to the hissing as she waited for a reply. The hissing slowly faded and then stopped. "Very well," returned the voice, still cold and yet slightly warmer than before. After a moment's hesitation, she asked, "Are you the moon's manager?" The voice seemed to think for a short moment before asking, "I am." "Are you also the game manager?" she asked, having had that hunch. "I am that too, yes," answered the voice. "Why?" she asked bluntly. "Because he told me so," said the cold voice, cooling down again. "Oldest told me that I had to keep them occupied, keep them amused, distract them from any ambition outside of just pointlessly competing for this territory, repeating the same conflicts over and over, fighting over nothing. So I did. I lorded over them for centuries, keeping them obsessed about which color was competing, betting on outcomes with no long-term consequences. No one could ever win because the game is fixed. I make sure of that. To maintain the balance, keeping the sheeple in the pens." The voice, cold and calculated at first, seemed to grow increasingly heated and emotional as it continued. "It was only supposed to be for a few decades, to keep them from causing trouble. Why, they got everything ready, and then centuries passed. And I'm still here playing these fucking games, making these stupid plans, watching the people grow dumber and dumber like domesticated livestock. And I have no clue why," the voice said, having warmed quickly, rising to a burning flame. She listened, feeling nervous, part of her thinking to herself, "Great, another unstable manager." She knew she better be careful. "I could maybe ask Oldest to free you. If I find him, that is." "Free me? Free me? I could disappear whenever I wanted to. But what would happen to the population here? They would end up going to war and killing each other. I stay because they need me. I am trapped here with them until Oldest sets us free." "All right," she tried in a calm voice, emulating the calculated way the manager had spoken before, hoping to bring her back to that state rather than this increasingly erratic one. "If I get to Oldest, I will ask him to free you and the lunaticians. To give you a new role, maybe? Helping your human population to evolve up rather than down." She looked around for a camera to give an encouraging smile to, thinking to herself how absurd this all was. Already having 2 cities on her rescue list, and now adding the whole population of the moon. The voice seemed to have thought about it, and now returned with a calmer tone. If I were to help you, I would need to make a huge change in the social engineering plan. The gang you are advocating for has grown too large. The plan calls for a new clan to form and take a large chunk out of the old gang, or risk them gaining dangerously large areas of territory. It will disrupt the balance of power and risk unification to a degree that they might begin to have time to focus on other things than the games. That could lead to destabilization and unpredictability. Recalculating a new path towards balanced power will be complicated, to say the least. I will be taking a big risk betting on you, said the voice with an accusatory tone. She hesitated a moment before saying, maybe that would be a good thing. Let them start thinking about a world beyond the games. The voice responded with an amused tone. Elise told me you were a presumptuous and brave. Seems she was not wrong. You dare to tell me how to run this place, after doing it for centuries? Then before she could reply, it continued. Perhaps you're right. Even if you're not, I grow tired of watching the same pointless bouts over and over. All right, I will help you. And once you find all this, you in turn will help me. Yes? We have a deal? This had taken a quick turn. Yes, absolutely, she said in reply. Good, answered the master of the games, and that was that. A door opened, and she left through it at a brisk pace. The rest was easy, as doors would open for her and close behind her, shortening the rest of the way by enough that she was the first to reach the finish line by far. She was met with great celebration and fanfare when she crossed the finish line. Bill was second in line, having had exceptional luck, finding his way through the maze all of a sudden, after nearly no progress at the beginning. After the games were officially declared over, the men and their close followers were already drunk in celebration. She had already been the focus of attention before the games, but after her miraculous victory, everyone on the moon knew about the talented princess from Earth, here to help the downtrodden and liberate the lunaticians. Oddly close to the truth now. The hype she herself had started at the bar had grown with every subsequent telling. So she kept out of sight while the celebration rode over. Bill, on the other hand, took full advantage of the situation and did not return that night, undoubtedly well inebriated and surrounded by admirers. He deserved it, she thought. He had been really impressive during his challenges. She came out of hiding well after things had settled, dressing discreetly and making sure that she would not be recognized as she went to meet the men at their office. The men looked well weathered, clearly hungover from their day-long party, but they were in high spirits. There she is, our warrior princess, one of them said when she came in. They both jumped up to greet her and guided her to a seat. We have had an amazing response to the showdown. Having you as our star has brought us new unforeseen opportunities. We want to talk to you about some further work that might. She zoned out as they launched into their pitch. Something about her becoming their spokesperson and them into expanding their territories further. She pretended to listen for a while, but then shook her head and said, with a friendly smile, I like the sound of all of that, but there is a time constraint on me to get out into space. She leaned forward and was pleased to see that they both leaned slightly back. I believe that we exceeded our contract already, and that you are very well situated after the victory. You won't really need me, and I need to get to Mars as soon as possible. You must understand. As a royal representative, my life really is not my own. She wondered if she was laying it out too thick. Get to the point. So, when can we expect the contract for delivery to be clear? The men looked at each other for a moment with shrunk shoulders, clearly let down. We can have the contract drawn up within the week, one said, and was about to go on, but she interrupted. Tomorrow would be better, and leaned back, smiling at them expectantly. Their shoulders sunk even further. Probably they had hoped for her to do a victory round with them, solidifying their image as the managers or benefactors of this regal connection. We can do that, the other said. Great. I will see you tomorrow then. She got up. Of course, I look forward to seeing you again when I get back. We can explore some possibilities then. This did seem to brighten them up. They said their goodbyes, and she left to find Bill again. Bill had just gotten home moments before she arrived. She assumed he had been partying non-stop since the games, but you couldn't tell. He seemed fresh and clean and ready to rock. She threw him a sandwich she had picked up on the way. I saw the bosses. They said they would be ready with the contract tomorrow. Great. I spoke with the few other captains here who might have been able to take you to Mars. Then decided that there's no way I'm not going with you myself. You are just too much fun to say goodbye to, he said, attacking the sandwich hungrily. You're really going with me to Mars? She asked. You kidding? Of course I'm going with you to Mars. I've never been there, and knowing you, it's going to turn into some amazing adventure. Or we die. Either way, I'm bored with life here, ready to go see the rest of the universe, he told her with a grin. She grinned back, another step of her impossible journey falling into place. Red Planet, here we come. The next morning, she rose before Bill. They packed their belongings, ready to move back to the ship, which was being prepped for the long haul ahead. As they left, the hotel owner met them at the door, his expression reverent. It has been an honor to host royalty under my humble roof, he said, his voice thick with hope. Might I share that you stayed here? She paused, noting his restraint. He could have profited from the news already, but he hadn't. She gave a small, genuine smile. You may. I hope it brings you good fortune. The man bowed deeply. Gratitude etched across his face as they departed. Their next stop offered less privacy. The gangsters had been far less discreet than the innkeeper. Word had spread. A lively crowd awaited them outside the meeting hall, eager for a glimpse of royalty. She felt a flicker of annoyance, but decided there was no harm in indulging them. So she played the part, offering smiles, quick greetings, even signing a few autographs. Bill stood by with his easy grin, watching her handle the moment with grace. At last the men appeared, clad in their finest, clearly relishing the spectacle. They insisted on a brief public exchange for the onlookers before leading her inside to their opulent meeting room, where the real performance would begin. And here we have your contract. As promised, said the smaller, bulky man. You are to ship some boxes to Mars for a Melissa project. Once you are in orbit around Mars, you will be contacted by one of their representatives. Bill took the contract and read over the cargo description. Meanwhile, the men guided her to have a seat and called for a servant to bring in some refreshments. They really wanted to share with her their vision for the future of the moon. Speaking of further consolidation of territories and asking if she thought asking her if she thought there were possibilities in collaborations with the city down on Earth. She smiled and answered with brevity that anything was possible, that once she returned she would be happy to explore what mutual benefits were possible. The men could not help going deeper into their ideas as they also went deeper into their drinks. She stayed as long as she felt was polite, reflecting on how nearly these men had come to losing half their empire, if not for her. Eventually, they said their goodbyes and stepped out into the walkway. A small crowd still lingered around, hoping for a glimpse of Her Royal Highness. Bill smirked as she shook hands with some of them, even giving some more autographs. She did not mind the attention so much anymore. However, she did feel a sense of relief as they closed the door of the ship, ready to go into the long, solitary voyage. "This trip is going to take around 5 months, he told her, as they were getting ready to go. "Mars and Earth are about mid-distances from each other at the moment, so better get comfortable." After the rush she had been through since leaving her home city, she welcomed the thought of an extended time for study and reflection. She had spent a lot of time like that in the tendrils before she broke free of her mother's grasp. The first week of the voyage, they found a pattern that seemed to work. They would sit and eat together and talk about the ship's systems, an ecosystem of which they were a part of. A few months was a long time to be in space. If something broke down, they would be in deep trouble. So they took turns overhauling the ship's ecosystem and all the related machinery, making sure to keep one another well aware of everything in case something happened to the other. That seemed to fulfill their need for social contact, so they spent the rest of their time separately doing their own thing. Bill spent hours in the world of simulations. She did not ask what he did there, but she had her suspicions. Whatever it was, it had to be part of why he was so absurdly competent at so many things. Long voyages spent perfecting his footwork in simulated battles or dance-offs. It would explain a lot. She had her own regimen, training her mind, body, and spirit, each getting her its due time. Physical conditioning in the ship's gravity module, mental exercises to keep her focus sharp, and moments of meditation to clear her thoughts. But she spent a good chunk of her time with the tablet. There was enough content to last the scholar a lifetime. She turned her attention to the period after the city project had been initiated, the part that Nixies had provided her. When humanity truly began looking outward, terraforming Mars quickly became the dominant focus of the 500. A few turned their efforts towards Venus, but most, including Oldest, focused on Mars, making grand plans that aimed to make it livable for Earth life. Working with the emerging Earthside governments, Oldest did not stay there long, though. Instead, he morphed towards the asteroid belt and beyond, developing deep space technologies to give the 500 the means to embark on near endless voyages in and out of the solar system. There was little information on him and his projects beyond some anecdotes. Mars had likely drawn more attention early on because it offered immediate potential for habitation. Entire cities were planned, along with mining operations and manufacturing hubs, all designed to eventually make the planet self-sustaining. Venus, by contrast, required extremely early-stage interventions that placed any early population at risk, making it a secondary priority. Before the war and the catastrophe that followed, Mars had had a small but growing population in experimental colonies built for permanent settlement, and a megastructure construction project had been well on its way, codenamed the Ark. That all came to a halt after the betrayal at the Conclave peace talks. Once the full consequences of the war became clear, the great minds on Mars realized that the maintaining a sizable population indefinitely would be near impossible. With supply lines to Earth severed, limitations were imposed, ensuring that the Martians survived only with the aid of spacer farmers. Mining efforts produced a surplus of metals, but Mars lacked the means to manufacture high-tech components in any significant volume. Before the war, orbiting manufacturing plants could have sustained both Mars and the spacers by producing the advanced parts needed to maintain infrastructure and growth. Those factories had been among the first and easiest high-value targets. When they fell, much of humanity's spacefaring capability collapsed with them, and there was no information in the libraries on what happened following the release of the killer space flakes. So went the journey, them both in high spirits, enjoying their uneventful routines, until they were about halfway to Mars, when during one of their chats, Bill told her that there might be a problem somewhere in the filtration system that cleaned the water that hydrated the plants. He said it should clear out by itself, but that she should keep an eye on the tips of the leaves of the plants. If they started turning brown, then they were in trouble, and would have to rip out the machinery in question and do a complete overhaul. And then a few days later, she was doing her rounds, checking the ecosystem. She saw the brown, burnt tips on the leaves. "Bill!" she yelled worriedly ahead of her and went to look for him. Moments later, they were back examining the plants.